Most hardcore. Some of them talk, but lacking in character. How can I relax when it's theft of innocence? The harmless are broken. Oh, what tragedy to meet death with the lost word unspoken. Hide it behind the foundations. Charity constructed house of euthanasia. Architects of house of cards remain hidden behind one noble cause. Extravagant facade masquerading as God. I don't buy it at all. I like the real thing raw. I tell the whole veil off. The lights on or off. I get mine either way. The stellar man in effect. I'll leave you free and breathless like true psychedelic acceptance. Worldview becomes transcendent. This midnight smoke is so high octane, paralyzing the presence. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to This Week in Tyranny, the most hardcore news show on earth. I am your host, Conrad Rogas. Welcome. Thank you for joining me on episode 37 of This Week in Tyranny. Today is Friday, August 18th, 2023. So, the most hardcore news show on earth. I say that every week. I stress it. I write it on more and more web pages. I'll talk a little bit about it. Why do I keep saying that this is the most hardcore news show on earth? Why do I wear that as like a badge of honor, right? Like, why wear the term so proudly? Well, it's not just that it's factual that this is the most hardcore, that you're going to get the things that are going on in the world, right? But really, I'm hoping that somebody will challenge that. That's my whole plan with this. I'm hoping someone who wants to do something like this or is doing something like this is going to take that personally, and they're going to challenge it, because living in 2023 is so fake and the people so ignorant that the people that are really worth reaching are the ones who have developed like a high tolerance to the drug of the illusion that we are given constantly, right? So I want to reach the people who are tired of it, like me, who are just so fed up with it and they're numb to it, this whole reality, just living everyday life as it is. So I hope to inspire someone who's going to tell me, well, no, you're wrong. This Week in Tyranny is not the most hardcore news show on earth. And then they'll tell me what is, so that we can get more people doing this type of thing that I'm doing is weekly or regular basis, analyzing what is going on, talking about what is going on, so we can really, because we don't have any voice when it comes to what is happening, what is reality, right? We get it from the news, we get it from all these news sources, we get it from official government sources, and that's not good enough because it's always misleading, it's always lies. None of this is what is really happening, and if somebody can constantly feed you what reality is, well, you're a slave to that. You won't be able to act accordingly, to change the future. You will be stuck. You will always be chasing the future because they're telling you what the present is. The present is the most important, right? I know a lot of people don't want to touch the news. I've talked about this before because, of course, you can be wrong. It's hard to stay on top of things. It's hard to really do an in-depth breakdown as things are going on, because not only do you have to process it in real time, you have to try to relate it to your viewers. Like, this is a difficult thing to do, right? But people are super talented and they can do this, and that's what I want. I want to get more people to do this, because we can actually make a big impact. By myself right now, I'm not making a huge impact on people, but I knew that when I was coming in, that it was going to be difficult, right? But here's the thing. When unapologetic truth, this type of just telling it how it is, right? Cut off from all inhibitions, not caring about what people say, not caring about offending anybody. When that type of style, that hardcore style, starts to become something that's popular and desirable, like a desirable method of journalism and communication, when that happens, then we can start building a real truth community. This is really what we need. We can start building, like, we can really start making some progress once we have people that are just more even aggressive. This type of classical male aggression is needed, because it just seems like we don't have enough, like, we don't have enough builders, really. We've got a lot of talented people. We have a lot of specialists, people who want to be free, but we don't have enough hard-nosed guys who are just willing to stand on their principles and say, no, I'm not moving. Because unfortunately, most of those guys, they're working, they're already making their stand, and it's usually for their families, or whatever they like. Whatever is important to them. Truth is not really important to these people, unfortunately, but we can change that. So let's jump into the story. This one's about the Hawaii wildfires in Lahaina, in Maui. I'm sure you've heard about the fires in Hawaii, right? There are over 100 people dead, probably more. There are many more people dead. I've heard things like that the remains are unrecognizable, like they're asking for people to get DNA swabs so they could identify the remains they're fighting, right? So this is like real aggressive wildfire, very destructive. And then you've got the displacement of people, their homes being destroyed. Whoever left that area that is burned down has no housing. There's a housing crisis. Of course, Hawaii, you got limited space, right? It's an island. So I'm not too familiar with their infrastructure, but I imagine it has to be limited to some degree, right? It's an island, right? Significant amount of people, though. This is an entire state, right? So what's the point with this, though? Like, why am I putting it on This Week in Tyranny? Well, the point of this, and where the tyranny is in something like this wildfire, is that when disaster strikes, anytime disaster strikes, government is not to be trusted. That's the main idea. I'll spend time talking about that. But this is really the stuff that matters, even more so than someone getting arrested, or some type of law being passed, or some type of non-government organization trying to leverage some power, right, to get an iron grip on a certain sector, right? It doesn't really matter. All that stuff doesn't matter. It doesn't matter who gets elected. And I'm talking to, my people. I'm talking to you guys who pay attention to who the president is, right? It doesn't matter who gets elected, for real. But this stuff matters. It matters whose house gets burned down. This is the kind of stuff that actually matters in life. Not the LGBT agenda in schools. Yeah, that matters too. Of course it does. But on a deep level, the events that actually have the most profound impact on what our reality is like. So I'm talking about, how all of our lives go down. The events that really affect that are when somebody's house gets burned down, when somebody burns alive in a fire. This is the stuff that matters. It matters when a pregnant woman gets handcuffed, right? When somebody rapes a child, when one of these cops, beats somebody to death. Things that actually happen to human beings, when injustice actually happens to human beings, when their entire life gets turned upside down. These are the things that have the greatest impact. Now, I don't talk about each one of those stories, right? Because there are too many. What's the point of finding those individual stories, right? But here we have an instance of that happening to at least 100 people, right? That there's this fire swept through and they're gone, okay? And during disasters, right, we find out what the world is really like. That's what it's really like. It's not about your job. It's not about what you do on a daily basis. It's not about, all these things that we've grown some accustomed to, getting your car fixed, all this stuff. We find out what the world is really like, and we find out that we have no safety nets. We have no safety net. We have no societal institutions to fall back on, to count on, because they're going to collapse anyway. And in disasters, we find this out. What really matters is only you and your family and the people who you can trust, a few of them. Those are the only human beings you can trust. And everything else in the world you see, it's pretty fleeting. It could be gone in a second, right? So, of course, before I go into this, I have to give my thoughts. My thoughts and my heart goes out to all the victims and their families. Of course, this is a great tragedy, and in a sense, that's all that needs to be said, and we could just end it there, right? But I do have some heavy aspects of this that I want to discuss rather quickly. I've already taken up too much time. So I'm going to talk about all of them, and as usual, I'm going to start easy, and then I'm going to go into the deep, dark abyss as I go on in this episode, right? So first, we're going to start off easy. So I have to talk about government and all this, and really government ineptitude. Anytime these disasters go down, we hear about how whatever the safety plans that were supposed to go, they failed. Whatever emergency plans were in place, they clearly didn't work. And any illusion of safety turned out to be just that, an illusion. So why am I targeting that at government? Well, this is the whole thing about government, right? This is the whole thing I get in conversations with people when I try to explain to them, that this is not a real system. This isn't a real concept. This is really mental illness to think that there's a ruling class that we're supposed to be listening to. But I always get the reply, well, this is what government's supposed to do. It's in the social contract because we would not be able to handle all this societal organization, right? So then the government's function is to get clean water to people, to deal with all of the infrastructure, to deal with all the energy, to manage all of that, and basically to do all of the things that wouldn't have a profit motive immediately available for it to become a private company type of thing, sanitation or whatever, things like that. So the reason I am constantly given for government being necessary and useful is to exist, especially in these disaster emergency situations, right? Healthcare, things like that. Water, healthcare, transportation. These are supposed to be the fortes. These are supposed to be the shining examples of government competence, right? After all, this is their big ticket. This is their claim to fame for us to be giving all of our money away to them, right? All these taxes. What is really the percentage of taxes you pay? Think about it. Now, I don't pay taxes. So I'm not talking about me. And again, that's why I say most hardcore news show on earth. The host of this show pays no taxes and is not going to pay any taxes. If anybody comes to my house, I've spoken about this before. But think about the percentage that the average person, probably you, the viewer, pays in your income in taxes. It's at least 30%. And when you count the sales taxes and all the other fees and the city stickers and your property tax and all of these fees, not even taking into account inflation, which is a hidden tax, I think it would be fair to say 40% at the minimum, you pay 40% in taxes. So that's almost half your labor. So imagine if I get done working and I'm supposed to get my check at the end of the week and I get paid in cash, and somebody just takes half my money away and just goes with it. If that actually happened, it wouldn't go on very quickly. This stuff would get solved quickly. And that's why I say belief in government is a mental illness, because it is. This is the kind of stuff that people let fly. But the trade-off for that type of highway robbery, for that type of confiscation of wealth, of revenue, right, that type of taking of money is justified with the idea that, okay, when an emergency happens, they will take care of it. So did they take care of it? What are the rumblings we're hearing from Hawaii? What are the people of Hawaii saying? They're saying the emergency sirens were not sounded, right? They had an emergency sound system to warn people just of this potentiality occurring, and they were not sounded. And now I hear that the emergency management official in this area has just resigned, because of course he did. The outcry got too big. People sounded the alarm. Unlike he did, they sounded the alarm. And then the fire hydrants also ran dry. I'm hearing this. I have not confirmed this myself, but I wouldn't be surprised if they ran dry. These kind of things happen often when it comes to these big disasters, especially. And I think back to Hurricane Katrina and the federal mismanagement around that time. I think of the infamous quote. This must have been like 2005, right? With Kanye West saying George Bush doesn't care about black people, right? See, back then, things were different 15 years ago. I was very young then, but people actually spoke more directly. People were a lot more hardcore, and people are a lot more soft now. That's why there's really only one of me doing this kind of news, right? Every week. So the fire hydrants ran dry, and then a report came out that the utility vehicles were blocking the way. Now, specifically the utility vehicles who were doing electrical service. They were fixing the down power lines, and they were trying to put up new electrical posts to basically remedy the situation with energy and loss of power and electricity. But from people, eyewitness testimony, like they were saying this, you had interviews with people, they're escaping a fire where you could literally see the fire behind them, you could see the smoke, you could see their homes burning, and they're waiting in like a gigantic traffic jam on this road, and they cannot get through because at least half of the road, right, of a 2-lane highway is blocked by a diagonally parked electric utility vehicle who's trying to get stuff fixed. And it wasn't an emergency situation because the eyewitnesses said, okay, if they're fixing a down power line, then I understand. But they were literally trying to put the post back up to fix the electrical situation. Now they were just doing what they're told to do, right, by their company. But there's the thing, in our current system where government authority exists, you can't just ram into a electric utility truck and keep going. Of course you could do that, but you would face consequences for that. Now government is in charge of transportation. They're charging all this stuff on the toll roads. They're building it with the tax money, right? So this is inexcusable to have a line of cars in traffic and then they have some kind of car blocking them. In a frantic situation like that, if you're blocking somebody's path, I think you're just asking to be hurt. Not that you're harming anybody, but you're limiting access to freedom. When you're limiting access to freedom, you can't really blame anybody for running you over or ramming you off the road, or beating you unconscious while they move your truck. Okay, but this is the government ineptitude. This is the kind of stuff that goes unsolved, right? People just have to deal with it. Now, what's the point? If it's a chaotic law of the jungle situation anyway, with these type of cars and you're trying to go around them, if you have to basically fight for your life anyway, well, what's the point of paying taxes then? We should just do what we do, because when disaster strikes, this is when everything's going to get real, when things are going to become their most pure and primal and simple. It's just going to be survival. What's going to happen? We're going to see that all these societal institutions that we spend so much time and effort to keep up and maintain, they're going to crash, and they're not going to fulfill their purpose, and therefore government is not going to fulfill its obligation at the time where they are most needed. Therefore, at the time where they are not needed, like right now, the people need to be making it known that they do not need them, and they need to stop paying their taxes, really. Because if you're funding them, you're supporting them, But that's the government ineptitude. That was actually the most relaxed part of this episode. I want to talk about government malice. Malice meaning intentional harm, right? So now I'm going to switch from the kind of government I'm talking about. I just talked about the government, but now I'm not going to be talking about necessarily Hawaii state government or US government, right? I'm going to talk about global government, which is currently in effect. People think that's not reality. That is reality. And really, I shouldn't even be repeating myself. I should just be really the most hardcore news show on earth, and we should be already past this, because global government is in effect right now. And what is the evidence of that? The United Nations, the European Union, the World Bank, the IMF, the European Central Bank, the WEF, World Economic Forum, the WHO, World Health Organization, the Council on Foreign Relations. You have more of these, all of the G20, the G7 summit, these meetings, and many, many more organizations that I cannot mention. All those organizations, they benefit from disasters like this. keep that in mind. They benefit from these type of wildfires and hurricanes and tsunamis. Why? Why do they benefit from that? More so than the local government. See, the local government doesn't actually benefit from that. Joe Biden is not benefiting from wildfires while he's in the presidency. And this is why people don't understand this, because it's a different level of rulership. Yet they are part of the same structure, the same hierarchy, right? This is called taking one for the team. Okay, that's what the state of Hawaii, the government of Hawaii, is doing. They're taking one for the team, and so is the government of the United States, because they're not the big team. The big team is over there in Rome, in the Vatican, in London, and in Switzerland. And really, it's not about the location that matters. Okay, it's the meetings of these globalists, right? So they all benefit from disasters, because then when this disaster occurs, the people, both the people and the leaders of the people, right, their government officials, they become persuaded to hand over more power and more control and more money to these global organizations. So it's in their interests to have as many of these disasters happen and for them to be as devastating as possible. And they're going to give the people of these nations, and the leaders of these nations are going to give up that control because of that fear of chaos again when disaster strikes, right? So let me just start off right off the bat. They benefit from this, and if there's a benefit, then okay, then there's reason for them to actually catalyze it, to actually make it happen. Okay, so what causes fires? What causes a wildfire like in Hawaii? Now, officially, there's no investigation actually, which there's been a lot of talk about that. What caused this fire? I don't know specifically, but what causes any wildfire is dry air. First of all, dry air and wind. Now, when I think of dry air, I've talked about it before, this topic before on This Week in Tyranny, is geoengineering. There's a lot of geoengineering going on. We don't actually know how much of it is going on, but it's going on. And we are not aware of the extent to which geoengineering is perpetrated. And I do mean perpetrated, like a perpetrator, like a criminal. Because this is a crime, this is a poisoning that's going on in our skies. For the people who are not aware, or they don't know about geoengineering, I'm going to say it how you may know of it, and I'm going to just say it like that. It's chemtrails. You know about chemtrails? Now that I've said chemtrails in my video, you will see a little either a Wikipedia or a YouTube disclaimer underneath this video that is going to say chemtrails, a conspiracy theory that, or they're going to say condensation trails, and the conspiracy theory is that they are chemical trails. So let me tell you about the chemtrails, okay? When you look in the sky and you're seeing these long lines, these long flurry lines, long sharp shapes in the sky, those lines are not normal clouds. Some of them are starting to look like clouds now. You can look in the sky and see these sometimes, probably in all areas of the country or of the world. Those are not normal clouds. I know the science. I know what contrails are, okay? This is what is called stratospheric aerosol injection, okay? I'll go back to that, but let me just talk about non-natural. When you don't see sharp lines in nature, okay? So yes, they're coming from these airplanes, but also you can, when you see a contrail, they dissipate quickly. Of course, I don't want to make this whole episode into like a dissertation on chemtrails, but when you look into them and you see sharp turns that cannot even be made by a human pilot, you can see these things. You can see all kinds of wild shapes. Now, if those are just trails coming from normal airplanes, it makes no sense. The flight paths don't make sense. Why there are so many of them, it does not make sense. I live by O'Hare Airport, very close to it, and I'm seeing all of the planes that take off and they land, and they are not leaving these trails, right? You're seeing these trails come off from these planes, and you could just see the way they spread out and they linger in the air and they leave a grid in the sky. These are not normal clouds. So please keep in mind, geoengineering exists, okay? I dare anybody to debate me on that. Do a video, debate me on it. I'll go live with you or pre-recorded. But of course, anybody that wants to debate me on chemtrails has clicked off of this video already. So I'm just going to move on. And the thing about the stratospheric aerosol injection is, I actually did an episode about this. I mentioned it in an episode 2 about the environment, is that they are moving towards solar geoengineering. So this stuff they're spraying, they're going to be sulfur particles to create a sulfur layer in the upper atmosphere to then reflect more sunlight. And ostensibly, the purpose is supposed to be to reduce the carbon being trapped in the atmosphere. So it's to reduce carbon, it's to fight climate change, right? But there's research out there about how that practice, specifically solar geoengineering, which, by the way, people will say, oh, there's not a lot of solar geoengineering going on because it's not going on officially. But I mentioned it in an episode a few episodes back about a European Commission. The European Union is actually calling for more global centralized talks on the dangers of solar geoengineering. So clearly it's in effect, is being utilized right now. But the research that I mentioned is about how that can create droughts and it can create dry air. And there's an article about that. I'll link to that article. It's a peer-reviewed article, by the way, in a very reputable scientific journal. But of course, Harvard University is now running a counter-communications campaign, like a little information campaign, to basically debunk that and discredit that no, the solar geoengineering actually is not going on as much as people say. It's not going on at all, and it doesn't actually prove that can cause drought. So, and that's from Harvard University. That's from one of these Ivy League universities that, of course, has ties to these global think tanks and Satanist ideologies, right? Let me move on. I'm going to take a drink. So, let us go on with this government malice, right? Well, we have some instances of arson, and I'm going to call it straight up arson. I'm not going to call it a false flag event or a hoax, right? This is part of being the most hardcore news show on earth. This is called arson, when you burn something down on purpose. So I'm going to talk about the potential of the United States government or the Hawaii government or other organizations or cliques or groups of people burning down this stuff, setting this fire in Hawaii on purpose. I'm going to talk about that possibility. I'll talk about the history of, I'll talk about some arson, and I'll talk about other criminal mass killings done by government. I always go back to the example of how Hitler came into power. He set a fire in his government legislative building called the Reichstag. This is like if Trump burned the White House down while he was president, to call for an emergency, to blame it on the leftists, and to stay in power as a dictator, right? This is kind of stuff he's actually being accused of. But this actually happened in Germany, right? They actually burned down a government building. So that is just some historical precedent. Now, as far as this kind of stuff in the United States, the JFK assassination being a CIA operation has been essentially proven. They keep talking about it. They keep being around the bush, but essentially everyone knows that the official story is false, right? There wasn't a single shooter. There were multiple shooters. There's all this stuff. The Secret Service was involved. The JFK assassination, which, by the way, that was the origin of the term conspiracy theorists, was the people who were saying, well, hey, this is clearly a government operation because there's no way it could have happened the way they say they did. But that's essentially, people know this. JFK assassination was shady, at the very least. Now, 9/11, the attacks on the World Trade Center on September 11th, that's not officially recognized as a government operation yet. But I have to say, if you still think right now that 2 skyscrapers can collapse into their footprint in just a few seconds at free fall speed, the way they did, if they can do that, then you honestly have not really thought about it, or you're too afraid of the implications. It's just denial at this point. If you really challenge yourself to look into it, really think about it, you will see that there's no way those steel beam they had the steel beams on the outside those buildings, the way they're reinforced, to get hit with a passenger airliner, which compared to those beams, that's an aluminum can hitting that building, and that brought it down exactly, falling, taking the path of greatest resistance against all current known laws of physics and gravity and everything. So the United States government will kill thousands of people and create disasters. This has already happened. Now, am I going to try to prove that was done here in Hawaii? No, I'm not. I can't prove it, and it's really not the point. It's really not about proving culpability with the false flag natural disasters, which there are going to be more of. I'll talk about that. But it's not about proving culpability because you might be wrong. Who knows what really happened? That's not what it's about. It's not about catching them with a red hand, setting a fire, and that will be our proof that government is immoral. We don't need to go there. There's a tape from 1969. The tape is basically a testimony or a talk by Lawrence Dunnigan, talking about when he attended a meeting in 1969, and there was a presentation, a lecture given by Dr. Richard Day, who was like a director of Planned Parenthood, very high level, a pediatrician and doctor at the time, right? And it was called, well, I don't know what the actual lecture is called, but this is called The New Order of the Barbarians, I believe is how you could find it. It's Lawrence Dunnigan. And he talked about basically this person who clearly was in the know about what's going to go on in the future. In 1969, he said, we will be able to control the weather soon. He said that in 1969. And he said to them, and I don't mean about cloud seeding to make the rain in the atmosphere fall quicker. I'm talking about actually controlling the weather. He said that in 1969. And this is 50 years later. This is the kind of rebuttal that I get. It's like, oh, okay, yeah, geoengineering is just cloud seeding and they can make it rain, but that's not really going to cause droughts or darken the sun. People still say that now. This person who was in the known, Dr. Richard Day, he was countering that 50 years ago at an insider lecture. That's why at that lecture he wasn't allowed to record it, otherwise this would have been recorded. They were not supposed to record it or take notes in any way. Lawrence Dunnigan actually took notes of what he was hearing on napkins, under the table. So, natural disaster, false flags, this is the thing of the future. It's not going to be mass shootings anymore. It's not going to be terrorist attacks anymore. It's not going to be a pandemic anymore. This is the thing of the future. You're going to see natural disasters, and no one is really going to know what happened. And this is the thing that makes them so effective, is because, well, it won't be able to be denied. It won't be able to be questioned the way that a pandemic or a terrorist attack can at least be questioned, right? It's just going to happen, and the people are going to have to accept everything that comes along with it, right? And this is what the dark occult does. They exhaust their available tools. They use everything in the toolbox, and once they'll exhaust the tool to the end of its use and usefulness, and then when it's no longer useful, then they go on to the next tool. So they're just switching their tools. We must have done a good enough job with the pandemic, or it just got old, and now the environment agenda is coming up next. So you're going to see a lot of natural disasters, and they're not going to be questioned by all the people questioning everything that's going on now. Those people will not be around. They will be too fearful, and they will not be knowledgeable enough about these agendas. So, and another thing I have to mention about government malice is just because within government, especially some of these younger individuals that we don't really hear about at the local level, they have a lot of collectivism and cult beliefs. I mean, government is collectivism in itself, right? No individuality. Everybody has to do the same. Everybody has to listen to the dominator in charge. But I'm talking about other cult beliefs, like these popular ideologies like zero carbon. You know, zero carbon is, it's not about the animals, it's not about plants. It's about destroying the human way of life. It's about destroying human activity. Then you have this type of satanic environmentalism, and I do say satanic because Satanism is all about the inversion of the natural order, and that's what these environmentalists want, who are pushing these agendas. They say on the Georgia Guidestones they want human beings to remain in perpetual balance with nature, but what they actually want to do is degrade the human being and lower their dignity to be just another animal, and then live in a way that is equal with all of the other animals. And that's not environmentalism, that's not perpetual balance with nature, that is a cult belief, right? And then you have things like transhumanism. The reason I mention that is because I lost it. It was somebody who was like a younger official in Hawaii that had access to water that could have been used to prevent more of the fire, but he didn't release the access because he holds the water to be like sacred, like he has native Hawaiian descent, but of course the natives, they don't say this. This is like a new age cult belief of somebody, a younger person, a little older than me, I think, who has found a way to get into government and now is in control of a resource like water, controlling this resource. No one should be controlling water. There should be no control of this resource. The access to water has to be unlimited and not arbitrated by any human being. It is just like truth. The access is unlimited. Anybody can access it at any time. So basically he put that under lock and key because he holds that water to be sacred. This came out, I actually saw it in an InfoWars article, so I might link to that. But let me give a long-term solution for natural disasters, right? Solutions are important. Too few people talk about solutions. So by solutions, I don't mean preparedness, I don't mean supplies, and I don't mean planning in case something bad happens. I'm talking about like a long-term solution. So what do we have to do to actually make it so that there are no more natural disasters, right? And the answer, that solution is, it's an irrefusable demand for information. We have to demand information, right? We have to demand information from whoever's managing most of these federal lands where the wildfires are happening. The government, especially the federal government. Because here's the thing about all these things. If there's no transparency, then there's no assurance of emergency prevention. That means you can't entrust that to them. You can't entrust that to government if there's no transparency. Because here's the thing. What I'm getting at is we need to demand like data of what's being sprayed in the air, what kind of geoengineering is going on, what's the soil like, what is the real data on the soil. I'm talking about the secret stuff. I'm talking about the stuff that they're going to hide, and they're going to say, well, that's national security. That's the thing. If there's such a thing as national security, then you're never going to be safe from disasters or atomic explosions or floods, because in order to obtain the information to make the right scientific decision, to be able to put yourself in a position where these disasters won't occur, you would have to get rid of the national defense excuse, right? We need to demand all of the documents. We need to get all this knowledge. We need to really push government to give us that, because all the time, on a daily basis, 24/7, this earth and the animals and all of the land and us, there are constantly treatments being administered to us, like guinea pigs, right? There are constantly things that are being released, whether they're by toxic runoff or they're released intentionally. So we need to figure out what this is just like when they ask you at the hospital, are you taking any medication? Well, we don't know. We don't know if we are, right? So we need to find that out. But if we actually tried to do something like that, we would get hit with the national security thing, because there's of course information that they will not let us access. For example, what the military planes are doing and what they're spraying in the upper atmosphere. That is of course not going to be released to the public, because they're going to say, well, we can't release that information because then the other nations will know about our military operations. Okay? So therefore the solution to all these tragedies is really to get the people to quit the armed forces. And I know that seems far-fetched from what we started talking about, but this is really the answer. You get people to quit the military, and then we can solve these wildfires. And it absolutely follows, and this is what would happen. So that's really the answer. Get them to quit the military, get them to quit the police. And people will say, well, what about the other countries? And this is of course the argument. We can't just get rid of our military, because then what about the Chinese military? Well, they're just going to go in and take over. It's like, okay, everybody has a lock on their door. You can't just leave your door unlocked because people will come in. Well, that's the thing. I'm not just talking about our country. I'm not just talking about Americans convincing other Americans to leave the United States Armed Forces. I'm talking about everybody who can hear me, right? Everybody in the world, because all of us living in the world, our lives are actually the same. So all of this geographical separation, life being so much different in Russia or India, it's different only to the extent of how authoritarian the government is over there. And then, of course, what kind of resources they have, what kind of morality do the people have. But really, life is all the same. This geographical separation is fantasy. And all militaries are the same. And it would do us good for the people to quit all of them. All the militaries. And this is really what we need to do. This is the only solution for real. Because what are you really going to do? Any kind of safety precautions that government is going to tell you to take, they're of course going to be used as an ace in their sleeve to make sure that they can get more control whenever they see the time is fit to take more control from you. So, and the way they can enforce that is through the militaries, through the National Guard, through the police. So these armed forces need less membership, and that's how we're going to solve these wildfires. Okay, another drink, and then I'm going to conclude this video. Yeah. So the antidote to all this, big picture. I'm not talking about wildfires anymore, right? Really just wanted to recenter where I am at this point with my work, with this show, with where the world is going. A bit of a recentering. So what is the antidote to all of this? The antidote, the cure, the thing that will get us out of this, our ace and our sleeve to fight in this battle, the thing that is actually going to make this world a better place, while we try to actually implement freedom in the world. The antidote to all of these things, all these disasters, all this suffering in the world is love, right? I talked about this before, but I'm going to talk about love in a different way. I'm going to talk about love as being something, as having no fear of death. Having no fear of death, that's love to me. And it's also an optimism that most people don't understand, because it doesn't necessarily have a reason. It's not necessarily grounded in something you're excited about, okay? Or something that gives you cause to be happy about. That's not the kind of love I'm talking about. I'm talking about just being full of life. You know, those kind of people that are full of life. That's love, and that's what's going to really push us forward. And that's why I say it's the antidote, because this makes us impervious, impenetrable, and this makes us immune to all of the stuff that is going to be sent our way as we try to free ourselves from these chains. So this type of energy is what fuels integrity, it fuels loyalty, it fuels intelligence, it fuels creativity. All these kind of concepts are fueled by love, which is basically not being afraid of nothing. because you know what you're doing, you know what you need to be doing, and you wake up in the morning and you're just ready to go out there. That's love. Now most people find that only through another person. They find it through a short time. Others will find it through faith. And I say that actually might be one of the best ways. That might be better than even finding that with a significant other, because those people are relentless. Those religious nutcases, yeah, they're relentless. They're just intellectually brainwashed. But that is love. Don't get me wrong. What they got, love is being relentless. So what I'm talking about is, we got all this bad news going on. We got all this somber talk. We got all this suffering going on, all this news of collapse. Yeah, that's happening, but just go outside. Don't be afraid of the sun, right? Just because, even if they're spraying chemicals in it, don't be afraid of the sun or the chemicals in the air. More importantly, don't be afraid of the person walking down the street, right? Talk to him. Talk to him. Or talk to her. Talk to the person walking down the street. Start a conversation with somebody and see what you can learn. This is what I'm talking about. Not having fear. This is what I had to learn. It took me a long ass time. I'm still learning that. Now, I've never been a very loving person, right? I've never been lovey-dovey. So I'm not the type to start conversations on the street. If you see me, I don't talk much, really. People I don't know. But this is the change. I'm starting to change this, okay? It's having good effects on my life. Okay, it's having positive effects on the lives of other people. So that's why we need to do that while there's no fire or natural disaster going on, because once it does happen, once you got disaster, once you got like a tragedy or mass casualty event, then the dynamic of fear cannot be escaped, and no love is possible. Okay? So then that's not to say that people in crises can't love each other. They can, but that's the thing. When you're running from a predator, when you're fight or flight mode, there's no love there. The emotion is cut off, right? But that's what fear is for. That's why nature put fear into effect, because it's to arouse simple, repetitive, forceful physical action when there's an immediate threat of being killed. It's just the threat of being killed, right? Like in the next few seconds. Like if somebody's chasing you, you're about to die in the next 10 seconds. That's when you should feel fear. Otherwise, there should be no fear. These things that we think are normal and normal fears, like public speaking, this is not a normal fear. This is basically a slave mentality, a slave programming that we've been programmed with. I used to be afraid of this camera too, for the first few episodes, because that's not natural. It's not natural to get in front of people and speak your mind, or not interrupt, but derail a conversation at the lunch table or the dinner table to talk about a topic that would never be mentioned at the dinner table. The fear of telling a parent, stop hitting your child. You know what I mean? These fears don't actually exist in nature. The only fear that exists in nature is if somebody comes in this house right now talking about, hey, I heard you're saying you're not paying taxes. That's when it's time to be afraid. And that fear is actually good, because you know what happens when you're afraid? You get a whole lot of blood running through here and your legs. And that's what you need. That is the proper application for that emotion. In all other applications, what I call the applications of peacetime, as opposed to wartime, love should be the emotion. And love is not this kind of infinite tolerance for everybody. It's not just loyalty and sacrifice. See, I used to define it as that. I used to say love is just loyalty and sacrifice. But I'm going to adjust my definition. I have to. It's not just that. You can be loyal and you can sacrifice to somebody, but you don't really have that. And I had to grow up and realize that. So I'm going to adjust my definition. Love is not just loyalty and sacrifice. It's loyalty, sacrifice, but what it really is a freight train going downhill with the brakes cut. And the direction it's going is towards truth and away from fear. It's a momentum thing. It's an unstoppable thing. It's a thing that sees nothing as an obstacle because it will not be stopped. I used to look down on that type of love. I used to think that was it's short lasting and it goes away. Because this is the lovey-dovey kind, right? This is the Romeo and Juliet kind. I never had much respect for that, but I'm starting to develop it for the work, but also for the people that matter. You matter, and that's what tough love is all about. It's just you got to tell somebody they need to step up. I really needed to step up too. I wouldn't have done it if Mark Passio didn't damn near have a heart attack in 2020 screaming his ass off on there. That's what woke me up. So hey, the dynamic of being hardcore, that's what did it for me. So I'm gonna continue in my own way. I'm not gonna raise my voice because I'm not really like that, but this is who I am. I'm the type to give you some cold ass facts, and I'm really looking forward to hearing back from somebody about any of this. Freight train going downhill, no brakes, fully loaded towards truth. That's love. That's basically it for this episode, but I'll say this, I'll end with this. This is more like to my inner circle. This is for the people that know me, right? Because out of say the 70 people who watch this, I'm gonna have like 15 people who I consider like my inner circle that like really know me, right? I know that people think that I think I'm better than them. I've had this thought in my head, especially today, like being somebody who's so obsessive about honor, being honorable, being moral, being disciplined, being hardworking, being relentless when it comes to protecting people and freedom. They think that it's like arrogant to live this way. They think I'm trying to be above them. Like they think that I think I'm better than them. And even in the way I talked, even this episode, I can hear when I have that tendency of speech. Like, I know it could sound preachy, right? And people think that because I do a show every week, then like, oh, that guy thinks he's some type of holy monk or something like that. This is the type of energy I'm feeling from people, right? Because I do this. And I just want to tell you guys, trust me, I don't think I'm better than you. I don't think I'm above you. I don't think that just because, I may have more knowledge here, more skills there, more willpower here, I don't think I'm a better human being than you because I do this. Trust me, I used to be a scumbag. Like, I used to be a real piece of trash person out here, just doing general street stuff, like, and just juvenile stuff, even when I was an adult. So, just want to put that out there. I'm not a holy man, right? That's why I started talking more normally how I talk, right? Try to be more relatable. Because what's the point? What's the point of doing like a perfect Harvard type 2-hour presentation and nobody sees it and nobody feels inspired by it? After this, I'm gonna work on my intro. We'll see if I could come up with something more inspirational for this show and this show going forward. So those are my plans. Thank you very much for checking it out, and I'll see you next week on This Week in Tyranny.